Good afternoon. Welcome to Daraj Presents Second International Conference on Industrial Organizational Psychology. Before we start, I would like to mention about the legacy of IO Psychology Conference in Bangladesh. As many of you know, that in Bangladesh, Dhaka University Psychology Department, in association with En Route International Limited, are organizing this international conference from last consecutive 2 years. So in 2020, we at first started this conference with help of Endut International Limited, and they bring this IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, in forefront, considering the overall industrial issues, organizational issues that is happening nowadays in the entire world, actually. And it has also been accelerated due to the COVID pandemic also. We, we all know that due to the COVID pandemic, the world's economy has been changed a lot. The world's job sector has been changed a lot. There has been a lots of volatility, uncertainty, as well as complexity in different types of jobs also. So in considering all these issues and the current uncertainty in the economic field and in the industrial field, we planned this conference from 2020 in Bangladesh. And we are very much thankful to En Route actually, because they have patronized from the very beginning in this journey. And in Dhaka University, we have started this IO psychology journey from 2016. We have started a professional master's program in industrial organizational psychology in Dhaka University from 2016. And with the help of different organizations like En Route, like Epilion, like GEMCON Group, and different private organizations and government organizations, we are going forward to help the society, to help the industry and organization in a broader sense. And currently, there are lots of organizations who are practicing IO psychology. And you will be happy to know that there are several organizations nowadays who have especially industrial organizational psychologists. On this name, nowadays, they have this position. And there are lots of other organizations who are taking the help from IO psychologists in their HR field, human resource field also. And in doing so, there are several headhunting organizations. There are also lots of human resource consulting firms. They are also taking the help from IO psychologists in broader sense. To take this forward, we, in association with different organizations like En Route, are trying to build a research base also in Bangladesh. Currently, there are several research are going on industrial organizational field here in Bangladesh. And all of you will be happy to know that in every year, more than 5 to 10 papers are being prepared from IO psychology perspective here. And lots of other practices are also going on. So to bring this in forward, we try to organize this conference, and you all know that conference is always a very great platform where we can present our work. So in this conference, different researchers, different experts in our psychological field, they will present their keynote speeches as well as they will present their paper. In this organization, we already have 6 papers that will be presented, and we also have some working paper also. We also have some IO psychology related workshop also, and we are also we will also present some current work which are going on worldwide, like coaching, mentoring, as well as employee assistance programs, workplace well-being management, performance improvement program. So what are the current practices that are going on throughout the world as well as in Bangladesh that are also going to be present here? And you will be happy to know that from around the world, from Philippines, Malaysia, Germany, UK, from India, from Nepal, from Bhutan, from lots of countries, from several countries, participant has registered for this conference. And we have few papers from outside Bangladesh also. So I hope this will be a great experience for all of us, and we will have a lot of knowledge from here. And at this point, actually, with Thanksgiving, I would like to request our co-chair of this conference, Mr. Abu Daud Khan, to say something on this inaugural session. Thank you. Thank you, Abu Daud Bhai. Please.
Thank you, Salim sir. And once again, welcome. It's good afternoon here at Dhaka. And very happy to see that in our second attempt of this conference, as Salim sir mentioned, that we started back in 2020. We see that we are having a global audience at this moment, not only from the panelist perspective, but also from a participant perspective, which gives me enormous pleasure that with the vision we started these things, seems that it is getting traction. Just giving a small background of me representing Keynote Center for Development. It's an organization in Bangladesh fully focusing on the capacity development for the executives. When I say executives, we particularly focus on the government sector. We are working with government employees. We are also working with for-profit and non-profit. And as I mentioned, there are two dimensions. Globally, this organization groups, and there are a lot of research. But in the context of Bangladesh, probably we are a little bit in early stage. And considering, seeing the need, because probably you know that Bangladesh economic outlook is fantastic. We are doing really good for the last couple of decades, and we are seeing a lot of big organization is evolving. So, and we see a kind of a need for really professionals coming into this field to help our organization to grow. And at the same time, so when we started, COVID was not a big thing, but we started just to bringing this knowledge of psychology into our workplace. And at the same time, also connecting our local academician with our corporates, and corporates vice versa, corporates with our academicians. And in this regard, I approached Dhaka University and psychology department, and so far we got tremendous response from them. And with help of Dhaka University psychology department, we were able to connect other psychology department of our country. And basically, so this second conference is a kind of a result of this kind of a effort we put behind, together. So one of the objective I can say that is getting benefited, which is bringing academia and industry collaboration into place. Second thing, I'll be really happy to share and work on that. As in last conference, I mentioned that one of our objective was to bring this international knowledge to make it a local context, because there are this social behavior and behavioral and group. These are the kind of things which also having cultural and local context. So in our country, I'm saying this thing probably for our expert guests, there is a lot of scope to do local work so that our organization can be benefited. And so with these things, I like to once again thanks all the respected keynote speakers, panelists, and definitely a big warm welcome to our participants from across the globe. Thank you, Salim sir,
for your nice speech, and thank you also once again that there is such a nice industry and academia collaboration. I really forgot the term, but thank you for reminding me. As you know, in achieving sustainable development goal by 2030, we actually need to collaborate from industry and academia perspective. And I hope this conference and this endeavor will also help us to achieve this. So at this point, I would like to request our distinguished chairman of this conference, Professor Dr. Hamida Akhtar Begum, who is currently enriching the position of Pro-Vice Chancellor of International University of Bangladesh Agriculture and Technology. And she is one of my favorite teachers from psychology department. And before starting the journey of psychology in Bangladesh, she also was in philosophy department. So I would like to request, and in Bangladesh, actually, the development of psychology, she has very special contribution. She is still editing a journal, which is called Bangladesh Psychological Studies. She single-handedly still publishing this journal, taking all the peer-reviewed articles from around the globe. So she has a huge contribution of development of psychology in Bangladesh. We are really happy. We are really, really very much happy to have her as our chairman of this conference. So at this moment, I will request Professor Dr. Hamida Akhtar Begum to say something about this conference and show us light ahead. Thank you, madam. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Salim. You have spoken so much about me. I'm also looking forward to the deliberations of scholars. So distinguished scholars, resource persons, participants, delegates, and the audience of this conference, Salam Alaikum, and very good afternoon. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be present in this conference, which is the second, as I learned, second international industrial and organizational psychology conference organized by the Department of Psychology and En route Center for Development. We have just heard about what is going to be there from Mr. Dawood and also from Salim. So I welcome you once again to this conference with heartfelt tribute to the learned scholars who will be presenting their valuable research outcomes on various aspects of industrial and organizational concerns. We are aware of the importance of the role of industrial and organizational psychologists and the companies who are actively involved in the management of industries and organizations. In the recent past, that is in 2017, we have observed some shocking findings of Gallup research conducted on some 155 companies, which revealed that only 15% of the employees have dedication toward organization they work with, and 67% are not engaged with their work or workplace. Now imagine the situation. The situation of South Asia is much worse. It is the industrial and organizational psychologists who should actually step forward to help improve the situation through application of scientific procedures, starting from recruitment and selection, through training and adopting measures in sustaining motivation for work by ascertaining well-being of all the workers at all levels. So this conference has an added scenario, as it has already been mentioned. That added scenario is the challenge, and that is a challenge of COVID-19, in which has led to the global crisis with severe economic, social, and psychological consequences. We are often talking about the mental health issues that in the organization field. Occasional lockdowns have caused disruption of production and supply chain, financial insecurity, unemployment, and deterioration of mental health condition. Social consequences like rising trend in the violent behavior, domestic violence, for example, and early marriage of girls are also visible. This is only a few of the social consequences that we have. All of these add up to the psychological conditions like depression, anxiety, fear, monotony, despair, and that are remarkably noticed. These are some of the remarkably noticed changes that are connected with deterioration of quality of living of all of us, whether we are living in Bangladesh or abroad. With these facts at the background, the reputed scholars will discuss important issues with a major focus on psychological aspects of the people engaged in this field. That is, I mean, industrial and organizational psychology. One of the lessons learned from COVID situation is that we lack severely in the area of management and readiness to meet not only in the health sector, but in other sectors as well. This is not true for Bangladesh in particular. The situation is faced in many other countries, particularly in the countries of South Asia. We therefore need to overcome this weakness by way of strengthening our organizational setup. In the area of fourth industrial revolution, the entire world depends on industries. Experts emphasize on taking care of three crucial areas: management, leadership, and workplace climate, ensuring employee engagement and well-being. So the term well-being includes physical as well as psychological well-being that we are emphasizing. What I feel important for us is to build a strong and integrated management system through interdisciplinary and interprofessional collaborations, which we are looking forward in this conference. In doing so, we got to utilize the emerging modern technologies of the 21st century to address the issues in the industrial and organizational setting, and thereby attain the goal of sustainable development that describes people's right to continuous support and well-being. The key drivers that we often talk about of such development are government, industries, and organizations, and of course the employees. The employees are in fact very important as they contribute most to the development. As such, effective management, particularly employee management, is the primary key to the sustainable development. So research has demonstrated this as well. We have seen many publications actually demonstrating this. It has been shown through research how industrial and organizational psychology is well equipped with the tools to achieve this feat. Therefore, application of the theories of industrial and organizational psychology in a proper manner is recommended as major requirements in the 21st century employee management towards sustainable development. Another noteworthy research finding is that tremendous changes are ensuing in the employment sector. McKinsey Global Institute, for example, has shown through their research that was published in 2017 that industry and business are being transformed by the new wave of digital technology. According to their research prediction, that is 400 to 800 million current occupations could be displaced by 2030. This think tank notes, I quote, "If history is any guide, we could expect 8 to 9% of 2030 labor demand will be a new type of occupation that has never existed before." During shift to industry 4.0. So World Economic Forum has also predicted strong employment, growth. So we are expecting a lot of changes in our country as well as abroad. So employment in technical fields such as robotics, customer services, elderly care, etc., are just a few of these new occupations. And these are important ones to note. McKinsey Research Institute's research projects overall creation of 555 to 890 million new jobs by 2030. Such predicted changes in the work field calls for more efficient and effective role of the industrial and organizational psychologists and their industrial and organizational collaborators. We all know that we are living in an unequal world that we are focusing here. It is not only with respect to corona pandemic, but also with respect to all the socioeconomic indices. So our needs for development do vary. Now, what we need here may not be the same in Sri Lanka or in the US to keep pace with the goal of sustainable development. Our needs do differ. I hope the deliberations of the scholars of this conference will focus on all of these concerns and provide guidance to strategic planning for development in a befitting manner. In fact, we are in dire need to help improve the present condition and prepare ourselves for a better future. We look forward to know what our scholars and experts in this field are thinking to meet this goal of sustainable development, ensuring not only production, but also creating favorable changes in the workplace environment and assuring well-being of all in and outside the work environment. So with these words, I thank you all and wish this conference a great success. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, madam. And this is why we always go to you. This is why, because within a very short time, the way you have depicted the entire scenario of industrial organizational psychology in the world, in Bangladesh, as well as how it is being affected by the technology also. It is being accelerated by technology and its connection with the fourth industrial revolution also. That is really great and that is really amazing. So thank you, madam, for your nice speech, for your nice welcoming speech for this session. So at this point, I would like to specially thank Daraj Bangladesh. This conference is being supported by Daraj. So we, from our bottom of heart, especially thanks to Daraj for supporting us. And on this note, we will we also have among us our first keynote speaker, Vipka Welzamot. So we will listen from her. Of course, we know we all are eagerly waiting for listening from her. And we will start her keynote speech session at 3 p.m. Bangladeshi Standard Time. Before starting that, I would like to request Vipka to say something in short about this conference and before her keynote speech, if you'd like to say something.
Yes, I would love to. And really for me, it's a great honor to be joining your conference and to be invited to speak to you and the audience here. I think my excitement very much speaks to what this previous speakers have already mentioned, that I think for me it is critical that we don't just take theories and concepts developed in other parts of the world and uncritically adopt them. But I think the development of your academic institutions, your conferences and exchanges is so critical for making truth locally relevant and to developing your own knowledge systems and your own understandings of taking those concepts and elaborating on them and developing them further within that context. And it's a great honor for me to be part of that. So I thank you for inviting me to the conference, and I will share some thoughts to that, but really a great honor to be here.
So thank you, Vipka. So at this point, we would like to take a 5 minutes preparation break for the first keynote speech on organizational mental health in an unequal world, which will be presented by Vipka Welzamot, who is CEO, Chief Operating Officer of ICAS World. So we are taking a 5 minutes break here. Dear audience and dear attendees, please stay with us. We are coming back within a short period. Thank you. Once again, heartily welcome. And at this point, as you all know, we are waiting for this speech on organizational mental health in an unequal world. which will be presented by our distinguished keynote speaker, Vivka Wilzemot. She has been contributing in the field of employee assistance program since 15 years, like for last 15 years, and working in ICAS world. And in this industrial organizational field, like in employee assistance program, performance improvement program, she has wide experiences. And today we will learn from her, we will listen from her about her experiences and her expertise on this field. So at this point, I would like to request and invite our distinguished guest, Vivka, to present her keynote speech. So the screen is yours, Vivka. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salim. And again, just to reiterate, I'm very humbled and really excited to be here and joining you here today. And really excited to see and follow going forward the developments of industrial organizational psychology in Bangladesh, which is an exciting field to be in at the moment. It's an important field. And as the previous speakers have alluded to, that this is a critical time for Bangladesh, and not only recovering from the COVID-19 period, but also moving into the opportunities of the future and of development. And I think being at this cusp, bringing in the mental health agenda is fantastic timing and hugely important to make a success of this endeavor for all. And I would like to take you through some thoughts, and I do this very humbly from an international perspective. At no stage do I want to claim that I have deep knowledge of the Bangladeshi context, culture, and background. I think what I would like to share with you are views from the outside, with the great encouragement and focus on making what comes from the outside internal to your country, to your environment and your culture. And again, not assuming that I know, but wanting to share with you what I do know. And bringing in my experience at ICAS from an employee systems program perspective, working in organizations, helping organizations to address mental health issues, but also having worked for many years in South Africa as a country that had to find its own feet in a global environment, an academic environment, an economic environment, finding its feet and finding its own voice. And I think in that I wanted to share some of the thoughts that really have come from that environment, and really looking at really reflecting on the stage that you're in Bangladesh, in psychology, in organizational psychology and beyond. And I'll share some of those thoughts with you. So if we look at today's agenda, and I'm hoping that my slides will jump. Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about mental health in general, and some of the facts and figures, and then focus specifically on what we're seeing today. And again, from a global perspective, just sharing some of the data that we're seeing coming out of global stats, but also that we as ICAS are picking up through our services across the globe. And then looking at how do we address mental health problems. What can be an organizational response? What has it traditionally been, and where should we be moving towards? And lastly, a comment on what the theme is of the conference, and that is the inequality that exists at the moment, and really looking at finding ways to bridge the gaps and to create change where possible through the interventions that we deliver. So those are the aspects that I will be taking you through today. When we look at mental health, or rather mental ill health, we know that this is a worldwide phenomenon. In fact, one of the things we're grateful for, if one can say that with COVID-19, is that it has highlighted the plight of those that have been really at the forefront of addressing mental health and really have addressed the stigma surrounding mental health quite effectively, in the sense that people have become aware of the importance of mental health issues worldwide. But that it has been a problem we have known for a long time. And I have listed here some of the prevalences of the key mental health problems that we're seeing along in the world. What we do know is that 1 in 2 and 1 in 5 people, or between those numbers, will experience mental health problems at some stage in their lives. And at any given point in time, approximately 5% of the working age population has a severe mental health condition. And an additional 15% is having some mental health condition, maybe not severe, but is distracted by what they're experiencing in terms of their mental health. So those are big figures, meaning big numbers. And as your economy accelerates and develops, those will be numbers that you will need to investigate within your context, how that translates into your context, but this is likely to impact significantly. One thing I wanted to comment on here is if we look at the ICAS data, we have seen a shift with depression being the number one concern over time, being replaced by anxiety disorders, which have now in the workplaces taken over, and largely due to COVID-19, uncertainties, insecurities about the world, but also about workplaces. And we'll talk more about that phenomenon in a moment. Now, when I talk about these kind of figures, we got to look at what is the impact, what are the costs associated with this. And what we know is that the costs of mental health and mental illness have been significant on the global economy and on each country's economy, and that this burden of disease is not diminishing. So we are needing to acknowledge the impact and negative consequences of mental health problems to really build a business case for addressing those within the workplaces that we're creating. It's very easy to see mental health as something for employees to deal with when they are at home, for them to use their social networks and support resources to address. But what we need to acknowledge is that this is a cost factor for organizations to thrive, for organizations to grow and develop. To achieve that, we're needing to address mental health and bolster that and boost that, and have a support network for employees to achieve those goals. So it's not a nice to have. It's not something that we do when everything else is done. It allows us to achieve what we're setting out to achieve. And if we take this particular slide, which gives you some of the numbers, and look at organizations specifically, we know that individuals have challenges and issues. Someone might be going through a relationship crisis. Someone might be battling with concentration problems because of a recent bereavement, etc. But there are direct organizational consequences. And that is what we need to highlight and translate and foreground for leadership, for those making the decisions. That when people are distracted, there are consequences that are associated with that, with absenteeism, with presenteeism. So people being at work but being distracted. But there are more hidden costs, like your supervisory time, the supervisor needing to spend time with the employee, finding out what the problem is, managing a team, compensating for a team member not working, etc. There are times associated and costs associated with all of that. There are costs associated with recruitment, with replacing employees, with absence period and reintegrating employees into the workplace. And all of those factors start building a very, very firm argument why the focus on mental health in organizations is more than just a nice to have. Now, one thing that is important for us to understand is the risk factors that drive mental health problems. And those are multiple and they're complex. And I'm always a fan of going back to basics and to some of the basic theories that we have the great privilege of drawing from in our field. And here the biopsychosocial model is a very comprehensive, but quite well-known and really self-explanatory almost model to understand the etiologies of issues is really, really helpful to segment and understand what are some of the drivers behind mental health issues. So we have biological factors that will lead to mental health vulnerabilities that we need to monitor, whether that's genetic issues, whether that's physical health conditions, disability, or similar. But then we have psychological factors that will contribute to the vulnerability, and those are things like stress, social skills and coping skills, family relationships, as well as trauma. And then we have the social level, which is so critical, which is really the broader context, your school, your work, family circumstances, social conditions, and access to resources. All of those interact and interplay to really drive mental health and the potential outcomes of our mental health in the world at any given point in time. If we look at this slightly differently, there are several individual attributes that will contribute to mental health, either as an adverse factor or a protective factor. And I think it's important here to look at both the positive and the negative. We often tend to look at the negatives. We look at only the risk factors. We only look at those things that are potential problems. But what I'd like to bring to that is really a focus on the protective factors, which is really looking at what are the resources that are already available. I'm a trained community psychologist, and one of my favorite parts of community psychology practice and praxis is the focus of shifting away from a deficit model that only focuses on the negative to really looking at a resource model. And I think one of the things that was a great driver of community psychology in South Africa was to really look at what local resources are in existence, what local protective factors, resiliencies are already within the social fabric, within each individual, but also within each community. And we mustn't underestimate the kind of resources that sit there. So while we want to focus on the risk factors, understand those and address those, we also at the same time want to look at what is good, what is there, not to reinvent, but to draw and build on the kind of strengths that are already sitting within the broader society, but also within each individual. So those are some of the factors that we want to look at. So while on the risk factor side, we have things like, various individual attributes, so substance abuse being a big one, conflict, exposure to violence and work stress. Environmental factors would then also include inequalities and the exposure to trauma and conflict. So those are definite risk factors for mental health. But there are protective factors, and we've seen this in the COVID-19 pandemic, that those have often come into play. Social support, where there is economic security, access to basic services, as well as physical security and safety. So those are some that I've highlighted here, but there are a whole host of factors that are important to consider. Now, again, we're talking about an unequal world. Access to resources differs across the globe. And I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what that has meant within the COVID-19 context specifically. So when we look at mental health today, there are several trends, and we've heard a little bit about that in the previous speaker's address as well, is that we're living at a time where even before COVID, lots was changing. And I think it is important for us to understand the macro context and the macro system to really understand how that is impacting on the individual. So we have seen a very interesting trend of two almost opposing trends. One is the greater drive towards globalization through technology, through greater economic integration, interdependence of economies, where we are really becoming one globe, where one development in one country affects developments in any other country. But at the same time, we have also seen a rise of nationalism. We have seen protectionist policies. We have seen anti-immigration policies. We have seen various trends that almost speak to a de-globalization, where those two trends are constantly in conflict and in tension with one another. And the fourth industrial revolution we've mentioned earlier, where we are literally building one global nervous system, interconnected. Everyone is connected to everyone else, and really the impact how that has on how we live and how we work. There are trade wars and disputes over control of foreign investment, slowdown in financial and investment flows. We're seeing the economy being quite vulnerable at the moment, and that playing out and the impact that it has, especially on those economies that are really building, that are growing, and the potential instability that brings. And I think overall there is a growing uncertainty, there's a growing volatility, complexity, and insecurity that we're seeing. A lot of our young generations in particular are now affected by the thoughts and concerns around climate change, around the developments, the future, creating a hopeful future for themselves. We have a number of social unrests and social movements across the world that have really impacted. So if we look at Black Lives Matter, for example, that have really gripped the Americas and in Europe and other parts of the world. We also continue to see limited resources where access is different to resources across the globe. And COVID-19 has highlighted that. It's really brought that to the fore and has really disrupted our lives significantly at the same time. And at the bottom of the circle, you will see the focus on inequality, the widening gap between rich and poor, where we see acceleration of wealth in some parts, and we're seeing a decrease of that in other parts. And that brings, again, that instability and those challenges. And we need to understand that context for us to really understand mental health at this particular point in time. Now, you cannot talk about mental health at this point without addressing COVID-19. And this quote is quite poignant in that it outlines that the COVID-19 global crisis is an event that will reshape our society in lasting ways, from how we work, socialize, travel, and shop, to the level of security and surveillance we are accustomed to, and even to the language we use. And I think if you all reflect on how the world has changed over the last less than 2 years, that's been significant for all of us. And I think what is critical here is that really is the profoundness of the change, that it has really permeated our entire lives. It's how we work, it's how we socialize that's been disrupted, how we transact, and the way we learn. And we now have a conference online, we're not there in person, and how we can communicate with one another, and the way that we seek help. And I think the latter point becomes really relevant for mental health programs, for understanding that access to care, and there's also opportunity in that. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but it's the profoundness of change that we really need to look at. And I think for me, one of the other critical areas is to really reflect on the fact that while we were all dealing with one virus, the nature of the challenges was enormously different for different contexts. And again, I'm speaking about this broadly, not assuming that I fully understand the consequences of COVID-19 for Bangladesh. But when we are looking at this globally, we're seeing that the response to COVID-19 and the impact that it's had was largely shaped by the overall context in which it occurred. And right at the beginning of the pandemic, there was the global sort of a discourse that sort of depicted it as this one storm that we're all facing together. And I think very soon it became apparent that while there was one storm, we all had very different ships and boats to maneuver it in. And while some had great big yachts with lots of food and lots of resources, other people had tiny little boats and maybe rafts to maneuver that. If we look at the differences in resourcing in different countries in terms of their health infrastructure to respond to COVID-19, the inequalities become really very pronounced. So while some countries had extensive track and trace programs and there was disruption and lockdowns, etc., social unrest and insecurity was a much greater problem. In South Africa, during the first lockdown, more people died from violence or violence from security forces enforcing the lockdown than from COVID-19 itself. So those kind of differences are important to highlight again, that we need to understand the impact of COVID-19 in the various contexts. Interestingly, we have been tracking the mental health outcomes of the pandemic over the years. And if you look at the 2020 data, one of the puzzling and striking things was that the one thing we expected was an increase in suicide rates during the pandemic, and that is a trend we have not seen. But the data is largely limited to countries that one would consider to be one of the richer economies, and little research is available from those where that is not applicable. And we need that research. We need to understand what is the impact, what are the findings, what are we seeing, and what are some of the trends, because all of that will be shaped by the local context. Now, why does COVID-19 impact on mental health? And I think these are just some of the examples of feelings and issues that might result from COVID-19. And again, these are generic issues and will take very specific local flavor and understanding. I think when we're dealing with issues that relate to illness, to life and death, it evokes the cosmologies that we use to understand the world, the meaning that we attach to the world, which is why it is so critical to understand this in context and understand the culture behind it. But some of the general trends we have seen is that there's certainly been an increase around health anxiety, and a tendency to catastrophize. Now, that was particularly relevant in the beginning of the pandemic, where there was great uncertainty about what would happen. It was unprecedented, so there was nowhere to draw on to know what would happen and how we would deal with it. Quarantine, social isolation, and being disconnected from others. The disruption of social relationships where they were overlaid with fear, whether there was a lockdown or not, whether people adhered to lockdown or not, relationships were impacted. And for many, that meant that important social networks were disrupted, and with that, the social support as one of the sources of their resilience, one of their protective factors for their mental health, was disrupted. The fear from vulnerable individuals and loved ones, the fear of stigma and victimization relating to COVID-19, reactions to that, and really that fear of being singled out, being vulnerable, being at risk. The challenge of working differently and under difficult circumstances, when people were sent home into environments where it was expected of them to work, but the environment wasn't suitable for work because they were in a setting where there was family and there were things going on, etc. So that particular stress. The stress from decreased job security and financial security for oneself or for others that impacted on so many across the globe. The frustration from managing education, parenting, caring under difficult circumstances, how families were impacted. We're only now starting to see the research coming out indicating the impact that it's had on families, on women, on youth, and different groups within family units. And again, we need to understand that for your context. And then I think what we've seen in some countries across the globe, a mistrust of authority, that being rattled, being thrown by what seemed indecisive from leadership, the fear of economic collapse and social unrest, that uncertainty in the macro environment, really impacting and again shaping mental health and often triggering those that had vulnerabilities and really driving that for them and requiring a response from us. I think probably the key issue around COVID-19 was that it is unwanted and unwelcome change. Change is always stressful, but change can be positive, change can be chosen. In this instance, it is unchosen. That was something that was unprecedented. It happened suddenly and it changed every single area of our life. So no wonder that we would have seen an impact on our mental health, because as the old saying goes, our greatest fear is our fear of the unknown, and COVID-19 confronted us with that across the globe. And I think what that resulted in is really pressure from all sides. And that is that the individual at the heart of this was really facing that burden to have demands from work, demands from friends and community, and demands imposed on oneself, as well as demands from families and significant others. And what we saw was that pressure just became too much, where a lot of people really struggled to hold together those various dimensions, which didn't lessen. Demands at work weren't decreased because people were working from home or things were different. In fact, in many industries, the demands were increased and there was additional pressure. Perhaps the pressure because there was a threat of job loss, or there were less people available because people were absent and ill. So demands of work would have increased. Demands from friends and community that needed help, that required care and support, increased. And in terms of family and significant others, the same would apply, where there may be care needs, support needs, and general insecurity. Parents may have felt that children needed additional emotional support because they felt uncertain and insecure about what was happening. Schooling being one example. But then with that, and I think during difficult times we tend to do that, we feel an enormous burden of responsibility and often struggle to really manage that pressure effectively and to see it in context. But instead, we jump and we have a greater need to fix things and we take on more pressure. And that is often at great cost to self. And that is then when we start seeing playing out mental health problems and mental health difficulties. Now, how would we want to look at this from an organizational perspective? What role can organizations play, and what responsibility do organizations have here? And I think, as I mentioned earlier, it is important for us to highlight that addressing mental health in the workplace is not just a luxury, but it's really an essential component to ensuring that employees can do what they do best. And I think we referred to it earlier that employees are really what's driving organizations. We live in a knowledge-centered world where it is about what people know and can do. And we need to ensure that we really drive and free people's potential and their capabilities and allow them to function at their optimum. Now, mental health is a significant burden on that, as we showed earlier. There are several risk factors that surround us, and the importance is really for us to address that effectively and have a strong organizational response to this. So when we look at how we have managed mental ill health within organizations, is that it often is, if we look at a traditional approach of managing mental ill health, is that we would often have a combination of medication, talk therapy, and social interventions. We would often find that it's provided by primary care providers or specialist mental health care professionals, such as psychiatrists, psychologists, or perhaps social workers. And we would find that that is done within government, community, or private medical facilities if those are available, either through inpatient or outpatient. And there are differing degrees of support provided by national structures. So every country has got its own infrastructure, such as helpline or other support where that is available. And there's different investment from the state or private into such programs. Now, that is typically what we're looking at, but what we're seeing now is that there are several impediments to care. There's a lack of funding, there's still a lack of awareness, there's stigma, and then adequate resources. With the growth of mental health demands, a lot of that model, the traditional model, is not going to cope. The resources are insufficient. There's not enough. There are not enough psychiatrists. There are not enough psychologists for the entire population. So we're needing to think creatively in working together to look at new approaches to addressing mental health care and to addressing that requirement. So here are a few thoughts. I think it's important to incorporate what I mentioned earlier in terms of the global trends. So looking at technology, for example, looking at a multidimensional approach that incorporates all of that. And for example, mobile and online access to resources and support. This is something that we've seen really develop rapidly over COVID-19, that even in environments where perhaps professionals were hesitant to start using telehealth and teletherapy, so using video or chat or other means of accessing care, while there was a hesitation around it during COVID-19, it was the best we could do often. And it has shown to be enormously effective, enormously helpful. Really important for us to create easy access to help and support, so community helplines, emotional chatbots, free apps. What can we do to use and utilize technology to drive that and to support that? What social interventions can we offer that help us to address at a broader scale those risk factors to prevent mental health problems? How can we ensure early identification and triage to appropriate and available treatment options? And important for us to look at awareness campaigns, breaking through stigma, education programs, destigmatizing mental illness, and really making organizations and people aware of their impact, making self-help tools available, and really looking at mental fitness programs. Employee assistance programs and wellness programs can play an important role within organizations. And again, a snippet from South Africa here is that where the public infrastructure was limited, where there was limited access to psychiatrists and psychologists through the public health system, EAPs became an avenue to provide that support as a gap, as really supporting in a collaboration between the public and the private sectors, really offered that support to a large number of individuals and their families. Lastly, in that multidimensional approach is really the referral to affordable quality mental health care, psychiatry, hospitalization, rehabilitation. So we got to have that We've got to look at how that plays out. But we need to look at all the other factors and really drive that overall. Now, when we look at ending off, and that's really taking me to the last point of today's topic, and that is really the issue of inequality. And I named this all things unequal, and really looking at bridging gaps and creating change. And then these were just some of the thoughts that I wanted to leave you with, looking at the theme of your conference and the context in which you operate, is that I think inequality exists on multiple levels. And that is in the globe in terms of the economies. It exists in academia about which voices are published and heard versus which ones are not. And I think within each country, there will be different inequalities and exclusions and marginalizations that are important to consider. So to address an unequal world and to drive mental health in an unequal world, I really want to applaud you for your focus on local research and finding local solutions. And really for you to continue driving that is really a fantastic achievement and really something where I'm very humbled and proud to be part of today, is that it's important to take those concepts and drive that and finding local solutions that are applicable to your context. And to continue to map systems, to understand the systems that you operate in the broader context of the country and the globe, but also within each organization, understanding what are the subsystems, what are the various levels. Again, going back to a basic concept, the socio-ecological model by Bronfenbrenner, really looking at the various levels from the individual into microsystems, macrosystems, exosystems, as well as chronosystems, to really understand those multiple levels and understanding how they impact on the individual and their mental health. And to then look at interventions that systemically address risk factors and challenges while driving and promoting resilience and protective factors. Again, giving it a positive focus as well, not just a negative one, looking at available resources and driving that. And those were just some of the thoughts that I wanted to leave with you. And that takes me to the end of today's presentation.
Thank you, Vipka. Such a wonderful and full of presentation from your side. So of course, we will go for the question answer session. Before that, I would like to request one of our distinguished guests among us. Okay, so Vipka, thank you very much for your very much informative and full of speech. So at this point, actually, I would like to request one of our speaker, Shakshi Handa, who is HR leader in Bangladesh, and she is leading Unilever Bangladesh as HR head. So we would like to listen from her on this topic of organizational mental health in an unequal world. So Shakshi Handa, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salim, and good afternoon to everybody, all the 115 participants on the call, esteemed panelists, my fellow speakers who have just shared very, very good information, and also all the academia, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm going to share my screen for today's presentation. So if you could just confirm if my screen is visible.
Yeah, visible. It's visible.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. And thank you once again for inviting me on such an important topic, which is organizational mental health in an equal world. And, in the times that we're living in currently, I personally feel, and I passionately feel, that there's nothing which is more important than the employee mental health, and therefore very, very topical subject for us to talk about. So this is the one reality that has changed our world, coronavirus. This world will now be known as pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And this pandemic is not just a health crisis, it is very much a humanitarian crisis at multiple levels. It is a humanitarian crisis which has impacted health, economic conditions of countries, It has impacted sociological conditions of countries. And of course, it's not to take away from the fact that it's a big sort of medical emergency that a lot of countries around the world have seen. So first of all, I would hope that everybody who's attending the call today is safe, is free from the virus. And even if you have been impacted or your family has been impacted, here's wishing all of you a speedy recovery if coronavirus did indeed end up impacting you. So with that, I'll move over to, just a very brief overview of how this pandemic, the post-pandemic world, has impacted the consumer trends and the employee trends across the world. And it's important for us to talk about this because the post-pandemic world is actually very different from the pre-pandemic world. There is a very clear behavior shift that we've seen across the globe, not just in the West, but very much in Bangladesh and South Asia and India, where I come from. In all our parts of the world, we've seen a big behavior shift of people moving towards cleaner living. There is a high demand for highest standards of hygiene, cleanliness, and health consciousness. Yeah, there is a huge premium, and thankfully so now, on health and wellness trends, which are both within the corporates and outside of corporates. And when you talk of health, it's now being looked at in a much more holistic manner. You're talking about physical health, you're talking about mental health, you're talking about social, financial health, and the impact of all this in the world around us. Earlier they used to say that the world is VUCA, okay? VUCA standing for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And this term VUCA was coined around, in the 80s, 1980s, around the post-Cold War era. And, that's how the world was referred to. Now, from VUCA, the world has changed to BANI, okay, B-A-N-I. And I'll tell you the full form. It stands for brittle, okay, because things which used to appear as very solid have now, shown that they can also crumble down completely, and nothing is solid anymore. It's all brittle. That's the first word of Bani, brittle. The second word is anxious. This breaking down of structures, breaking down of seemingly solid world around us has led to a lot of anxiety in people around us. And that is what the A stands for, which is anxious. And the N in Bani stands for non-linear, because we've realized that the cause and effect are no longer linear. There are many ways and many sort of linkages that you see to things, and and relationships are more and more non-linear compared to what they used to be earlier. And I, of course, stands for incomprehensible, because things which seemed very easy and straightforward, are no longer assumed to be straightforward. So the world has become far more Bani, okay, which is brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. And this is a completely new sort of a trend which has impacted everything that we do. So we've moved from, towards trends which are more healthy lifestyle oriented, which are clean planet oriented, which are more everything, whether it's shopping or therapies or sort of connect sessions, everything has moved to e-commerce, of course, is booming completely out of the window for most of the companies like ours. And last but not the least, there is a lot of fear factor, because there is still a lot of uncertainty. We don't know whether there's going to be one more mutation. There's Omicron, which is wreaking havoc right now in our part of the world, in South Asia, in India, in Bangladesh. The positivity rate as we speak is more than 30% for the country, for Bangladesh. And the fear factor of what's going to happen next, how is this going to impact the economy? Is everything going to go back to normal? Is the GDP going to grow the same way? Is inflation going to go out of the window? These sort of uncertain questions are looming large everywhere. And this is really changing the way consumers are interacting with brands, the way they are consuming brands going forward. And if I was to just take this to the next level of key employee trends in 2022. And I look at the top 10 employee trends, two of them which really stand out for me and are very important in the context of today's discussion are employee well-being and hybrid work model. And I will be talking about both of them. Of course, apart from them, there are lots of other key employee trends coming up, and corporates and employees are watching out for them, including your skill development and analytics, all of that. But for today's discussion, I will focus a lot on employee well-being and hybrid work model. And employee well-being is no longer a good to have. Yeah, it's a must-have for every organization. And it's very simple. There are about 35% of the professionals across the globe. They feel 35% of professionals actually feel that COVID has impacted their lives extremely negatively, and that has impacted their anxiety levels. It has impacted their mental health, given them depression or whatever, basically some sort of stress. And that is very clear, not just in one part of the world, but very much all over the world. Closer home also, 1 in every 4 Bangladeshi feels that they have been impacted and their mental health has suffered, and it ranges from anxiety, depression, stress, and goes all the way to suicidal tendencies. And this is data, hard data. The impact of COVID-19 on economies, has been so huge. It's been estimated to be $1 trillion. This is the impact of depression and direct and indirect impact of depression and mental health illness related things which have been put together. And this, even in the last presentation, if you paid attention, it's close to about 3 to 4% of GDPs, varying from country to country. So it is a huge issue. It is no longer a good to have, it's a must have, and it is very much at the center of the plate when it comes to employee trends for the next year. And therefore, all organizations need to focus on this area. They cannot afford to treat it like an extracurricular activity. It is a must-have. Employee assistance programs are a must-have. Support groups are must-have. And organizations need to systemically arrange and create space for employee well-being initiatives. So I'll now share 5 key lessons from COVID-19 that I, from Unilever, have personally, encountered. And this is true from almost all organizations and employees. And, I thought I'll take a moment to tell you that I have personally seen so much in these 2 years during this pandemic. I think I've grown by not 2, but 10 years, literally. And this is true for not just me. It's true for every leader, every line manager, every mother, every employee who's been working in these difficult times. So my first lesson, it is about humanizing leadership. And in crisis times, there is nothing that can beat a human face of leadership. We are living in a very asymmetrical reality. Most of us have not seen a humanitarian crisis of this order, of this magnitude in our entire careers. And we have to relook at every single relationship at work from a different lens. We have to start being a lot more compassionate and empathetic at work, because the person that you're dealing with is just another human being who's going through a lot. I really liked what the previous speaker spoke about, that we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. Yeah. And somebody has a large size yacht and somebody has a really small canoe. So every leader needs to be cognizant of what their team members are going through, what their peers are going through, what their bosses are going through, both above, below, every level. You need to be mindful of what the world around you is going through before you go on with business as usual. All relationships need to be relooked at in a very different lens now. And we need to be far more compassionate. And we are actually going ahead and training our line managers. Anybody who has a team responsibility is being trained on how to deal with your team members in a more humane way. Try to put yourself in their shoes, try to understand what they're going through. It could be a single mom, looking after a family and doing her job at the same time with somebody sick with COVID at the same time. It could be a young couple which is struggling to make the ends meet because one of the partners has lost their job and is no longer employable at this point in time. It could be a middle-aged team member of yours who has old parents in the house and also young children who are doing virtual school from home. So everybody is going through some crisis or the other, and it's so important to not go by the traditional norms of what a good leader needs to be, rather redefining the whole premise of leadership and making it far more human. In crisis times like these, people need a human leader. They don't need a war cry. They don't need a macho man. Yeah, they need somebody who's human, who understands and who can appreciate and empathize with the situation that the other person is going through. So this is my biggest learning, something personally I'm quite passionate about. I've also written about this topic extensively, and this is something close to my heart. I really feel that the era of leaders with heart has now started post-COVID. Lesson number 2, organizations need to look at well-being far more holistically. Yeah. And when I say well-being, I'm now talking about physical, mental, emotional, purposeful. And all of these could be enablers towards well-being. Physical, I'm sure a lot of organizations are doing. They have, they have tie-ups, they have activities where the employees can come together. But of course, during COVID, it's been difficult. So everything physical now moved to virtual. There are lots of organizations, including Unilever, who are focusing on mental and emotional well-being of employees and have very robust employee assistance programs in place, which basically means that we've given all our employees 24/7 access to counselors who are professionally trained and who can keep who can speak to you, who can offer you the right sort of support and can keep your issues confidential. So it's anonymous, it's confidential, it's in your own language, could be Bangla, could be any other language that people need support in. And it's always available for all employees. And no surprise that the usage of our EAP or Employee Assistance Program helplines, counseling, have gone up to 35 to 40% in the last 1 year, which just goes on to show how much people needed something like a counseling service. And it's not a surprise, only 1 in 1 lakh people in this country, in Bangladesh, have access to a professional counselor outside, right? And in a scenario like this, where people were absolutely crumbling down under the stress caused by COVID, how would you find that 1 in 1 lakh professional? How would you do that? How would you gain access to him or her? You could only do that, if your organization supported you and provided you with a helpline, and you could call the person anytime, anywhere. So we've made that scarcity, into an opportunity. We've turned that scarcity into an opportunity and ensured that our employees, all 550 employees, have full access to trained medical practitioners and counselors whenever they need them. So that's about mental and emotional. And last but not the least, purposeful. This is a very, very important enabler of well-being. We really at Unilever feel, being a very purpose-led company, we strongly believe that companies with purpose last, brands with purpose grow, and people with purpose thrive. And we want all our employees to thrive. We want them to shine. We don't want them to just survive. We want them to thrive. And therefore, we've been helping them discover their purpose. What is their innermost, purpose of being around And what is the purpose, that what gets them out of bed every single morning? What gets their eyes to lit up when something comes their way? And we're helping people go through some critical life stories and discover their purpose and bring it to life every single day. So these are the 4 lenses which Unilever is applying, and a lot of companies are now beginning to apply when they look at well-being holistically. Apart from this, the 5th dimension that we've also now started looking at is financial well-being, because we feel that it is extremely critical, especially during pandemic, when a lot of people have been economically impacted, with job loss or with pay cuts or whatever the things may be. It's important to guide people even on financial well-being. So we've now added a 5th leg apart from physical, mental, emotional, purposeful, and that is financial well-being. Now, just wanted to give you a glimpse of the way we approach well-being in Unilever. We do have something called the House of Well-being, and we've identified, that we want to provide all our employees with the psychological safety and mental well-being support that they need in these difficult times. So our target is really all employees which are based in our factory or in our head office, and we have our own hotspot functions where we feel people need a little more support. And our pillars, of course, like I mentioned, are physical, mental, emotional, and purposeful. Some of the systemic things that we've put in place to bring this house of well-being alive is EAP, like I mentioned to all of you, Employee Assistance Program, which is nothing but counseling, free counseling, 24/7 for all our employees. We have financial well-being sessions for all our employees. We have something which is very unique and I wanted to share with you. It's called Mental Health Champion Program. And what we've done is that we've realized that sometimes employees or people just need a listening ear. Yeah, they need nothing more than that. They may not even need a professional counselor. They sometimes just need a listening ear, which is unbiased, which will not judge them, and will just understand and appreciate what they're going through. So empathy is the bedrock of Mental Health Champion Program. And we've trained about 60 of our own employees. They've raised their hands. They've said that we want to, do something for others. And we are happy to go through this training. So we've trained about 60 of our employees to become mental health champions. And what they do is they just lend a listening ear to anybody who's going through a difficult time in the company. Their pictures are well known, their names are well known in the company. And everybody knows who these 60 people are, and basis their function, their age, their closeness, people approach them and just have a chat with them. And if the mental health champion feels that they are able to offer some solace to them, they do that. If they feel that it's a more acute case, then they divert them and they signpost them to the counselors, professional counselors. But this is really acting as a very solid layer that absorbs the stress, that absorbs the sort of organizational tension which has been created by COVID. And this is something I'm extremely proud of. I myself, I'm a trained mental health champion, and it's a wonderful program. And we hope to have about 100 of them by the end of the year. Apart from this, we also have a lot of support networks throughout the organization. We have something called Shifashi Network, which is basically a support group of women for inviting, including, and supporting other women in the company. This pandemic has been clearly very, very stressful for women employees because the responsibilities that they had to deal with, the sort of household burden that they share back at home is a little disproportionate, unfortunately, in our part of the world. And therefore, we've seen that our women employees have taken it far, far harder than the male employees in the last 2 years. And we have data to show that, through our engagement scores, through our employee assistance program calls and things like that. So these are some of the ways. We also have a lot of sessions, that mindfulness and Zen zone sessions that we run for our employees. And I'm sure other organizations do it too. whereby you talk about, you build awareness about well-being at an overall level. You run some sort of yoga sessions, mindfulness sessions, basically let off some steam for employees to feel a little better. And we also have volunteering programs where people can be a part of something larger, something bigger, so that they can, again, detach themselves from the stress that they are personally going through by looking at things a little more holistically. So this is the framework that we use for managing well-being in our company. And my next lesson, lesson number 3, is that hybrid is here to stay, so we better design for it. It's going to be very different now going forward, especially when it comes to physical workplaces. Even currently, as we speak, we have opened our office only to about 50% of the employees. Okay? We've not opened it to 100%. The world which we used to live in pre-pandemic, where everybody used to go to office all 5 days or 6 days, depending on what their role was, is going to be very different in the future. Yeah, and this is also going to really impact employees' mental health and well-being. Because if they're forced to go back to work all 5 days a week or 6 days a week, they might not be at ease. They might not feel comfortable about it. They might be absolutely not open to it, given that they might have vulnerable parents at home, you know, in an age group which is far more susceptible to infections, or they might have younger children. Simply, the old ways of working will not work the same way in future. And it's better if organizations design for it, you know, and do something about it proactively. We need to move our mindsets towards hybrid. And we need to understand will not work in the future. And therefore, it's important to be well supported technologically. It's important that employees have their own space at home. They have their own ergonomic sort of furniture. They have full access to technology to do their work uninterrupted from home if they need to. And, you know, customized and bespoke approach towards office access will need to be adopted. Not everybody is going to work from home, and not everybody would like to come to office. There will always be people in between, and you need to account for it, and you need to design for it. So that's the third lesson. The fourth lesson is that mental health is real, and it's a continuum. Yeah, it's a continuum, like you can see, you know, on the left, there is red, which is in crisis. And on the right, extreme right, is a green box called excelling. And in between are many other shades. And this is the continuum on which every employee goes situation and project to project. And we need to realize that and appreciate who is on what end of the continuum and deal with them accordingly. Yeah, you could be extremely cheerful, joyful, energetic on one day when everything is okay, and suddenly, you know, you could be down with family and friends also falling ill, and within a span of 4 days, you could move from excelling and depressed, and all these might lead to poor performance. So we need to be very mindful of where people are on the continuum and realize and appreciate and empathize what they are going through, and, you know, pivot our expectations from people, from employees, from organizations accordingly, depending on where people are on the continuum. Within a span of 2 weeks, your entire situation will change from left to right. And therefore, you know, the next lesson is that everybody needs rest. Really stressing on the fact that people need to avail their annual leaves. They need to go on a break. They need a break. Nature can really disproportionately impact the mental health of employees. So we've been insisting that everybody takes rest. And when I talk about rest and when I talk about break, there are many types of break. First and foremost, there could be a physical break, which could be active or passive, taking a break and for example, just sleeping it out. Yeah, you want to sleep for 8 hours, 10 hours, entire weekend. You want to just invest in your sleep, and that's a good way of taking a break. At the same time, you could have an active physical break. You could go into stretching, yoga, retreats, relaxing, spas, whatever works. Different things work for different people, but that's all a part of physical break. Mental break I spoke about, it's really about giving your mind a break. Sometimes you've been working so hard, employees work so hard that they just need to have, say, a 15-minute break between two big meetings or a half an hour break. We really recommend to all our employees to keep at least a half an hour break between important meetings so that their mind can cool off. Just simply switch off your eyes or your laptop for about 15-20 minutes and collect your thoughts together before any big meeting. Sensory break. There's been disproportionate exposure to gadgets, to screen, not just for adults, but also for children in the last 2 years. And therefore, everybody needs a sensory break. And sometimes it could just mean that you put your laptop screen down and you just go out into your balcony or stare out of the window into nothing. Okay, that's a sensory break. No gadgets for some time. I personally keep my phone out, my mobile out of my room every single night. I don't keep it in the same room as me. I keep it out in the lobby area, around the charging area, very far away from me. And I ensure that the next 8 to 10 hours when I'm in my room at the night, I don't look at my mobile or my laptop. That's my sensory break. Yeah, people also need creative break because especially the ones who have been involved in heavy brainstorming sessions or any heavy thinking sort of sessions, they need creative breaks. It could mean simply taking a walk in the greens in a park, just disconnecting from the current hustle bustle and taking a creative break. And similarly, social, emotional, and spiritual breaks. So we've been telling our employees that these are various ways in which you can be taking a break. And we really encourage, we've allowed people to carry forward their leave if they weren't able to avail it. Last year, we've, done things like staycations for people to actually take a break because we sensed that there was a heavy burnout that people were feeling due to sort of mental pressure of the pandemic. And personally, for me, one big realization is that self-care is most important and your well-being is in your own hands. Yeah, we need to focus on things that we can control and not waste energy on things that you cannot. Because during a pandemic, your circle of concern can be very, very large. Yeah, you hear about news, what's happening, borders shutting down, UK declaring something, US declaring something, some vaccine coming out, some booster coming out, some disaster happening in another part of the world. There are lots of things which can be a part of the circle of concern. Now, these are things which you can't do anything about. And certainly within that, there is a closer circle, a tighter inner circle, which is called the circle of influence. And these are things that are completely in your control. And this includes things like your health, your mental health, of course, your sleep, your friend circle, people that you surround yourself with, your behavior, your attitude towards the pandemic and the issues around you. Yeah, this is a tighter circle. It's the circle of influence. And we should focus on only this because this is what you can really control. And, I've been telling all my employees to go through this beautiful book of Ikigai, and I would recommend it to all the attendees in the conference as well. If you haven't read it already, please do. Very, very helpful set of rules that you will come across in this book. It's called the 10 Rules of Ikhibai. And I personally swear by a lot of them. I read this book about 2 years ago, and I absolutely recommend it to everybody across the organization. It talks about things like staying active, which is very important in our times. It talks about taking it slow. And, sometimes just taking it slow can bring down so much of your anxiety, so much of your mental pressure that you'll automatically start feeling and observing the world around you, and that will bring down your stress levels. It also talks about not overeating and don't fill your stomach 100%, stop at 80%, and that would probably cure a lot of your disorders as well. It talks about keeping good company and being in good shape, which is extremely important in stressful times that we're living in. It talks about reconnecting with nature and living in the moment and being grateful for what you have. Gratitude is certainly one big part of self-care. And I would, again, highly recommend it to everybody. Keeping a gratitude journal, talking about, things that you're grateful for can really help you overcome anxiety. And that's what we've been telling our employees as well. So to end my presentation, I think my recommendation to everybody who's listening, whether they're a corporate or they are a student or they're an academician, the greatest investment you can ever make is in your own well-being, okay? And for organizations, it is in their employee well-being, because when you take care of the people, your people will take care of your business. So with that, I would like to end my presentation, and thanks a lot for listening in.
Thank you, Sakshi. And the term that you have mentioned, that humanly HR has started, and the concept that you have introduced with us, that is Bani, presentation, and we will have some question answer from him also. So Dr. Noor Mohammed, please.
Okay, thank you. And good afternoon, everybody.
Sir, we cannot see you if it is possible.
But you just telling that you can't start your video because the host has stopped it. Why? Just you have to open it maybe.
Okay, Mr. Habib, can you have a look onto that?
Yes, sir.
Is it okay now?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and greetings from the Department of Psychology, Jagannath University. And it was a nice presentation presented by two distinguished presenters. This presentation indicates that all the studies related to, I think so, it is assessment-based studies. But we should conduct how to manage the organizational mental health problems or health issues. In that case, we need to find out the assessment and formulation. Maybe OLJ mod has presented as protective factors and others risk factors. Protective factors and others risk factors. Protective factors, that you must assess protective factors, precipitating factors, predisposing factors, and as a whole, we should assess the individual employee. Then we make a formulation. How can we reduce these psychological problems, etc. In that case, I will say we must conduct longitudinal study. Like we must find out the effectiveness of mindfulness, counseling method, counseling techniques, behavioral techniques, etc. Then we'll get a picture. That means in Bangladesh, we have conducted a large number of researches. You, Mr. Selim, you have conducted a research, Ashik Mahmood, then Kamal sir, me also, a large number of studies, Azizur Rahman sir, etc. But after analyzing this research, I found all researches was assessment-based, severity, etc., etc. So it is essential for conduct longitudinal research to reducing the mental health of the employees. And in that case, In that case, with the participant, those who are participants, IO psychologists, they are practitioners, they will practice in the organization. So it is one suggestion to them: you must conduct these types of research with the help of your mentors. And it was a very nice presentation by the OLJ Mod and Sakshi Handa. And they have already mentioned that they have already mentioned that, but it is our part with the learner, it is our part. We have to conduct these types of research, otherwise we will not be able to reduce the mental health of the mental health problems of the employees. We know IO psychology, it has two meaning. One is I for industrial and O for organizational. Organizational means just organizational psychologist practices the employee well-being, satisfaction, health issues, etc., etc. So this psychologist have conducted many researches, but not in Bangladesh. So with the IO psychologist, me also a psychologist, all our IO psychologists are requested to conduct this type of research. That would be better for their mental health and removing the mental health psychological health problems and others. So thanks Enroute and Department of Psychology, Jagannath University, for giving me chance to say something about these issues. And I will again participate in such types of conferences. Then I think it will be very much helpful for the participants, those who have joined today's program. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Nur Mohammed. Thank you for your presence and your nice speech. And of course, the way you mentioned that we need to do some longitudinal research also. So as the development of biopsychology in Bangladesh is a very recent development with the help of academicians as well as private organizations, public organizations, we will surely go in this direction. So thank you for that. And of course, as a chairman of psychology department in Jagannath University, you will also lead your team to have some research on this topic also. At this point, I'd like to request Mohammad Sajjad Hassan, who is chairman and managing director of BASF Bangladesh Limited, to please share his views regarding organizational mental health in an unequal world. And we have some specific question to him also. Mr. Sajjad, we are not clearly hearing you. There is a patchy sound over there. So. Hello. Sajjad bhai, your sound is not clear to us. It is very much patchy. So I think Sajjad bhai has some problem in technical issues. So at this point, we would like to request, we have among us Mr. Sanjit Ahmed, who is group head of HR, BAT UK. So I would like to request Mr. Sanjit Ahmed to share his views regarding mental health issues in different organizations of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Selim bhai. I appreciate it. First of all, I would like to thank Enroute Center for Development for giving me the opportunity to talk in this seminar. And I believe this is a game changer. This is a game changer for Bangladesh organizational landscape, and this will get more and more traction in the days to come. And I'm also humbled to share the same forum with esteemed guest. I really enjoyed the insightful keynote speech, both by Wipke and Sakshi. I mean, wonderful. So much learning for all of us to take. And also really grateful to share the panel with the panelists as well. Now, of course, I would not claim that I'm an expert in this field. I would humbly like to share some opinion on a couple of areas. Personally, I have 20 years of experience. I have left Bangladesh approximately 10 years ago for my job purpose, of course. I have had a chance to work in different countries such as Pakistan, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, UK, and so on. Currently, I'm in a global role. So I think there are a couple of areas I would discuss about. One, I think the question I was asked was what measures can be taken to address discrimination in mental health support from organizational perspective. Now, I think there is a quote that I came across that happiness is not absence of problem. It's the ability to deal with it. Yeah. And the way we have been brought up in Bangladesh, because I have studied in school, college, universities in Bangladesh, this topic was never discussed. Yeah. When I graduated 20 years ago, this was a topic that would be never discussed. This was a taboo. Yeah. So we have come a long way. That's why I'm extremely emotional to be participating in this forum to discuss about it. And this mental health stigma and discrimination is a global phenomenon with severe consequences in terms of social exclusion and inequitable treatment to those who are suffering from this. And you've seen the first keynote speech by Wipke, where she presented some glaring stats. And when Sakshi was talking about 1 in 100,000 support, yeah, that also proves that how much more we need to do in this field. And it has to be addressed from the policy point of view. From a country perspective, what policies, resources, initiatives, and most importantly, culturally relevant narrative. The narrative that works for me in UK or Australia may not work in Bangladesh or Pakistan or India. Yeah, we have to find out what is the relevant narrative to raise awareness on this issue. Yeah. If I come closer to home in Bangladesh, I think first and foremost, there has to be a buy-in and common understanding from the leaders of all the organizations. It's good to see organizations which are multinational already embarking on a big journey. But you all know who are in this forum that there are plenty of local organizations where it is still at an infancy stage, I would say. And there's a big responsibility from the society, from the industry, to educate and raise awareness and have a common definition of what are we trying to address as an organizational perspective. Yeah. And the big forums in Bangladesh, such as FBCCI, Employer Welfare Federation, they have a big role to play to raise awareness as well. And while I'm very glad to be part of this forum, but I feel like I'm talking to the converted or preaching to the converted, because here most of the participants are from University of Psychology, field of psychology, human resources. I think one of the other things that we need to do is to make sure that how can we actually get more wider people involved in here. That's extremely important. So awareness building is key. Educating the top leaders is key. And then there is a buy-in. Second, and next one is, of course, access to the mental health support. Sakshi talked about EAP as well. So how do we make sure that this concept is understood in our organizational landscape? And then how do we give access? How do we make sure that there are people in the organization who understands what is required and then provide adequate support as well? Because as we all know that in Bangladesh, because of the inequality in society, people who are joining the organization, they may not have the equal level of upbringing, education, and so on. As a result, the organizations have much more responsibility to allocate right level of resources to bring equity so that every employee gets the right level of support. Now, I would share a couple of, because I've been asked to share a couple of lines on what we are doing in our current organization. Of course, BAT, we are a global organization. We have more than 55,000 employees across the world. with presence of 180 countries. We have people representing 139 nationalities. And for us, I'm lucky that as an organization, this employee well-being is at the heart of our people policy. Yeah, we know that if people are looked after, if their well-being is cared for, performance is automatic. And of course, we focus on all the facets, be it mental well-being, physical well-being, and also financial and emotional well-being as well. And we have a robust policy and an employee well-being hub through which employees can access all the facilities. We have a regular drumbeat. Throughout the year, there are initiatives to ensure that people are being made aware of different areas of concern. We also are making sure that we are training our line managers who are leading big teams, how to be aware of what are the watch-outs for. When do they actually refer someone to a professional practitioners? Yes, sometimes they can lend helping ear, but they have to have the ability as a line manager to refer their team members and employees to professionals when there are signals as well. Yeah, there are regular sessions for financial well-beings because that's part of life. I think one thing that we have to be very clear is every employee goes through their circle of life. We start our studies. Suddenly we realize that we are getting married. We have to cater for our family. We realize that we have to plan for our retirement. We realize that we have to care for our older parents. All this pressure comes across to an employee. And as an organization, we have to be clear that how can we support our employees through the life stages? And that's where mental health and well-being is just one aspect of it. And as an organization, we also provide an access to an app called Thrive, which actually helps people to address different well-being related issues proactively, I would say. Yeah. And I think the key word is here being proactive, not fix an issue when the issue arises, but how do we make sure if people are at a normal level that they are operating at an optimum level? And that's the key here. And as an organization, we're continuously focusing on this as well. So my request to the fellow participants, many of them have come from different academia, is do your best to raise awareness in social level, in organization level, and try to influence your senior leaders that how can we make sure that this is accepted, this is not a taboo, and people feel free to discuss about it. And only then we'll make the progress. Again, I would like to thank Enroute and all the organizing committee members for this fantastic initiative. Agenda is very robust, and I wish all of you continuous success.
Thank you, Sanjit Bhai. Thank you very much for your spontaneous and eloquent speech. So at this point, I would like to request Sajjad Bhai, he is there.
Thank you. Am I able? Can you hear me?
So your sound is still patchy. And
Is it better? Can you hear me now?
no. It is. I think there's some problem with your microphone. So if you allow, we can go to our question and answer session, if you permit, please.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sajjad Bhai, your speech is now clear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think before I speak about what we do as an organization in terms of addressing the mental health, I would like to touch upon the root causes of the stress or the mental health of the employees, especially who are working in the private sector. I mean, Unilever and British American Tobacco are at the top of the pyramid, meaning in terms of organizational practices addressing the mental health, those kind of sophisticated issue, I would say. However, there are many organizations in Bangladesh where some fundamentals or the basics are missing, which are causing severe mental health issue for their employees. If I give you some of the examples, I think it all starts with job insecurity, right? The COVID has made the situation rather worse, but irrespective of COVID, in the private sector, especially in our part of the world, the job insecurity is at the top of all the issues, I would say, which are causing serious mental stress for the employees. So, I mean, this is becoming very rare where people are joining and retiring from the same organization. Employee turnover rate is pretty high in the private sector. So we need to really address this issue. As I said, this is one of the main reasons for the mental stress for our employees. So one would be arguing that during the COVID period, the business has been struggling. So how do you actually, deal with these issues? Because some of the organizations are unable to sort of fund their fixed cost in terms of employee salary and all. So how do we handle this issue? I would be suggesting that this, employee sort of, what do you call it? How do you call it? The turnover should be the last resort, meaning that, you need to apply all your resources to make sure that, that would be your last resort to sort of minimize your fixed costs. So the leadership has to be very, very empathetic, especially during the crisis time, that just for the sake of reducing the cost, we reduce the number of employees. That should not be the case. Leadership has to be absolutely empathetic, and this is again more pertinent, as I say, during the time of crisis. So this is one of the root causes of the severe mental health issue for our employees, especially in the private sector, as I say. This second one is, of course, the uncertainty about the future. If you see, even today, in most of the private organizations, there is no defined retirement benefits for the employees. You mean what I say, the pension and those kind of schemes. There are a few, of course, good organizations, some multinationals who offer this retirement benefit in the name of many schemes, provident fund, gratuity, superannuity, all this. However, as I say, there are many organizations who do not have this defined kind of benefit scheme for the employees, which are causing severe mental health issues for the employees because of this uncertainty. Because people think, what would I do after I retire from the organization? How would I actually fund my living after I retire from the job? So I think there should be a regulatory framework in Bangladesh which would sort of force the organization to come up with this retirement benefit for the private sector employees in particular, be it provident fund, be it gratuity, and the pension, even it can be pension. Yes, as per the labor law, the gratuity has to be ensured, but in case of provident fund or the superannuity or the retirement benefit, I think the regulatory framework is missing. So there, the regulator should come up with a framework, a proper framework, as I said, which would sort of force the organization to develop their retirement benefit scheme for the employees. And we have been hearing about this universal pension scheme for many years, I would say now, but we haven't seen some real breakthrough in terms of implementing this universal pension scheme for the private sector employees. We don't have to go far, or we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have plenty of good examples in our neighboring countries, especially in India. This scheme has been introduced. I think if we can also do that in our country, that would sort of take away many mental agonies or the stress from the private sector employees in particular. There is one more component which is again very critical for many of the private organizations, which is the medical facilities for the employee, also for their family members. In some of the organizations, they do have very comprehensive medical scheme, but most of the organizations, they miss it. Some organizations, they pay a lump sum amount, very minimum amount with their salaries to the employees. So I think here actually the regulator can also come into the picture and guide the organization what should be a comprehensive medical scheme for the private sector to offer to their employees. I would say in many of the countries, one of the best practices is to offer the insurance, medical insurance for the employees. We can also adopt that. I think that would also sort of reduce many of the mental stress for the private sector employees. As I say, well, we are far behind from the best practices in ensuring the medical facilities for the family. I would like to request, especially the regulators. In the past, we have seen some of the good practices in terms of this medical facility. Some of the multinationals, even some of the local companies, they used to reimburse the medical cost for the employee and their family at actual. However, the tax authority actually has sort of amended the tax law, which is now forcing the organization to come out of that facility, meaning that now the law says you cannot pay more than 10% of the basic salary of an employee or 120,000 taka per annum, whichever is less. You mean what I say? So I think this is kind of restricting some of the organization who are offering some of the comprehensive medical scheme to their employees. So I would be requesting to the regulators to amend this law to allow the organization who wants to sort of offer such kind of facility to their employees, and this could also be replicated by the other organization as well, because at the end of the day, the employee matters, the employee health matters. So these are some of the I would say fundamental things which are causing a lot of stresses in the mind of our employees. I mean, the mental health of the people are being impacted because of some of these uncertainties. So if as an organization, especially the private sector, if they can address this kind of uncertainties, I would say the overall mental health status of the employees of the private sector of Bangladesh will go a long way. So I think those are some of the basic things that I wanted to bring onto the table. Yeah, apart from that, actually, the next question is, so what are we doing in terms of addressing some of the challenges? Of course, BSF being a German multinationals, we do have some good practices in terms of addressing, as I say, some of the uncertainties, be it retail benefit, be it the medical facilities for the employees and for their families. So these are properly addressed. Apart from that, some of the other speakers, they talked widely about EAP, employee assistance program. We do offer this kind of facility to our employee as well. These are regionally managed, and as one of the speakers mentioned, that we offer the free advice from the panel of counselors whenever an employee faces some issues, especially in relation to their mental health. So people can get access to these counselors and they get advice from these counselors. Besides this, I think one of the key issues I think we need to address is how do we actually engage with our colleagues more. So engagement is very key in terms of sort of reducing some of the stresses of our colleagues. So continuous engagement is absolutely vital. We organize a periodic kind of meeting with all the employees. We call also at least once in a quarter. We meet with all our colleagues where the employees are encouraged to speak openly about their challenges, be it personal, be it social, or be it professional. So that we do on a regular basis, as I say, where these things are discussed and the leaders sort of guide our colleagues, how to address those some of the challenges. And again, besides these periodic town halls, we encourage our line managers to get engaged with their teammates more frequently. As I said, the employee town halls are organized once in every quarter. However, the engagement with their teammates by their line managers has to be more frequent. So these are some of the practices that we follow in BASF to address the mental health or the overall employee well-being of our colleagues. So I think that's what I wanted to share. Before I end, actually, I would like to thank Enroute and all the organizers, the keynote speakers, and the panelists for participating in such a very critical aspects of the organization practices. So thank you very much once again from my side, and I'm open to answer any questions if you have, or if
Okay, thank you,
anybody might have.
Thank you, Mr. Sajjad Hassan, for your nice, eloquent speech. So at this point, I would like to request if our attendees have any question regarding our today's topic. If we have, we can answer. So is there any question that we have?
Yeah, the attendees must raise their hand to ask a question. Otherwise, we will not be able to hear you.
So I think there is a hand raise. Okay, from panelist side, there is a hand raise, I see. Haibe, can you address this? Okay, I think there is no question to address. So at this point, the way we have discussed our today's discussion, we started our discussion from Vika's speech on mental health in an organizational mental health in an unequal world. And she presented very nicely the global scenario of mental health in organizational setting. Then we came to Ms. Shaksi Handa. She also presented the impact of coronavirus that have on the our mental health issues, organizational mental health issues, and what are their practices and how do they address it. And she shared some of the practices that she and her organization also do. Then we came to our panelist, and we saw there is a emergence or importance of longitudinal research in this field in Bangladesh is very much needed, which has been addressed by our distinguished guest, Dr. Noor Mohammed. Then we also heard from Mr. Sanjeev Ahmed, who is a group head of HR and of UK BAT. So he mentioned about lots of stigma that we have about the mental health issues around the world, and his practices regarding this issue and his organizational practices, and where we can give our input. That has also been mentioned. And lastly, Muhammad Sajjad Hassan, he mentioned about the organizational inner issues, like how insecurity is affecting our organizational mental health here, and what can be done in this regard. That has been also addressed here. So at this point, I would like to thank all of our keynote speakers, especially Vipka, for her time and dedication for us and for such a nice speech with us, and all the panelists who have managed their time and they shared their practices with us. And we also thank to all our attendees who have made their time for attending this session, and also not but least that is Daraj, who actually supported this conference. So we especially thank to them also for supporting us in this program. So with this,
sir, there is a request from our side, from Enroute, that I would like to request the honorable panelists and the keynote speaker here to open their video for a picture.
Okay.
So we can use for our later purposes.
Yeah. So dear panelists, if you please come on video. This is for us.
Yes. Okay. So Maksudul Haq, please inform us when you are done with the picture.
Daud Bhai is there?
No, Daud is not here.
Okay.
Yeah, the panelist and keynote speaker.
Sakshi is there?
No, Sakshi is not also there.
Okay.
Vipka is here, I can see.
Yeah.
Okay. So Maksudul, please let us know when you're done. Okay, so I think
we are done. Yeah,
we are done.
So
yeah,
thanks
everyone.
This is a new form of virtual photo shoot. So thank you very much, Vipka. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. So bye. We are closing this session. Thank you. And those who are interested to join our next workshop, which is on virtual fatigue and digital well-being, please join. I am joining there within 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you.